I want to thank everybody that had interest in our products, obviously working with BridgeWave and StreakWave on this. So today we're going to focus on our new stack carrier sub-feature we introduced back in September for the Navigator product line. What I'll do is, for people that aren't familiar with BridgeWave, I've got a couple slides just to, real quick overview on that. But you'll see, BridgeWave is actually a part of Remic, which is based out in San Diego. We're actually owned by a company called Mosley, which is out of Santa Barbara. And then we have three different groups, within Remic. We have the BridgeWave group, which we'll talk about today on our product line, which is more of our commercial line brand name product. We also have an OEM business where we build a number of radios for probably the top 15 of 15 out of 20 microwave manufacturers in the world. And then we have a SATCOM group too that builds some products. So as far as the product line itself, we're going to focus on some specific features for Navigator, which is a licensed microwave product from 6 to 42 gigahertz. But we also have an 80 gigahertz product family that starts with the Flex 4G 1000, which is a gigabit product, the Lite, which is a 3 gig, and then our 10,000, which is a 510/20 gigabit product. So, okay. So before I get into a stack carrier feature, just want to give you a couple of updates on the actual Navigator radio itself. So this product started probably about 2 or 3 years ago in the development stages. We went into mass production earlier this year in January. And then some of the unique features of the product is going to be higher capacities in the single radio, and the stack carrier feature helps us do that. Some of the other unique features are replaceable diplexers. So customers can more or less buy base radio from StreakWave, and then once you get your channels assigned by the FCC, you can buy the specific diplexer for that base radio. As far as to my knowledge, there's no other product in the market that allows you to do that. Usually you have to know what you have for the FCC licensing first before you even buy the radios. The other unique feature is you can have one radio and it can act either as a high band or low band radio. And the way that works is just more or less rotating the diplexer 180 degrees, turns it to high band or low band radio. What this helps out is on sparing. So instead of sparing a whole link, I can just spare one radio, for that link, So modulation is up to 2048 QAM right now. And then we have specific radios that support up to 80 megahertz channel sizes. So this is a little different compared to some of our competitors that require you to buy, different products based on the channel sizes itself. So dual 10 gig SAPs. A lot of our competitors are still using gigabit. So if you're doing speeds over a gig, which we'll talk about on the subcarrier, it's a nice clean run where you can have one, single mode or multi-mode cable run, from the network closet or the base of the tower up to the radio, instead of running multiple cables and aggregating those together. So the other unique thing is supporting the Remic interface for the antennas. So this interface has been out there probably about 25, 30 years. A number of manufacturers have used it. A lot of our OEM customers obviously use it because we make the radios for them. But a number of antenna manufacturers, including Radio Waves, which StreakWave sells, has a support for the Remic interface. So as BridgeWave itself, we're not selling the antennas. You can buy those directly through StreakWave, and allows you to pick and choose, which antenna manufacturer you want to go with. So that kind of gives you a quick background on the Navigator radios, a little background on BridgeWave and Remic. So I will kind of focus on subcarriers. So what is stack subcarrier? So what we're doing is more or less doubling the capacity, inside the radio without actually adding extra hardware. So a lot of other competitors, what they require you to do is buy two radios. So if I want to, double capacity, and so I've got to buy two radios, buy a coupler, attach that to my antenna, have a lot of cabling and stuff down. With the stack carrier feature, you don't have to do that. So you'll see with the Navigator ST, which is a single core product, you can go up to gigabit with that product with stack carriers. And then with the DT product, which is our dual core product, the top speed for that is 2.25 gigabit. Again, nobody else in the industry can do 2.25 gigabit in a single radio, and that's on the 80 megahertz channel sizes. Internationally, we actually support up to 112 megahertz channel sizes, getting up to 3.2 gigabit. Again, those speeds, nobody else can touch those speeds in a single radio. So some of the benefits of using stack carriers, one is, as I talked about, you don't have to add any additional hardware to be able to do that. So with the ST radio, you could start with the base ST 1.1+0 setup. You want to go to stack carrier, more or less a 2+0 setup. It's just a software license and maybe additional capacity keys, but there's no additional hardware you have to do that. So the other thing is it's going to reduce your tower installation costs. So how is that going to be? Well, one thing is there's going to be less cabling coming down. So as I said, you can do a single cable run, especially when you look at the DT product at 2.25 gig. You can run either single mode or multi-mode fiber down, where a lot of other competitors are going to require you to buy 2 radios, a coupler, and then run up to 4 wires down and then aggregate that in there. So that's one of the biggest features you're going to see on that. So. And we do all the aggregation inside the radio. That's another good feature of the product. So we're not going to put the onus on the customer or their switching network to bring all those individual cables down. It's going to be a simple, again on the DT product at 2.25 gig, a simple 10 gig interface coming from the radio into their switch and pretty much right into their network then. So. Okay, so this is kind of how I'll lay out how it works on the DT radios. So we call it 4+0 stack carrier operation. So what we're doing is we're taking 2 individual 80 megahertz XPIC channels as far as being able to get that speed. So in the standard DT product, you have your single XPIC channel, or 2 80 megahertz channels, maybe 1 vertical, 1 horizontal to get 1.25 gig. And then to get 2.25 gig, we're going to need 4 channels. And in this setup, it's going to be 2 80 megahertz XPIC channels to be able to do that. The one thing you'll note is when we go with the stack carrier performance, we do drop down to 1024 QAM. So we do take a little hit on the capacity. So that's why we're at 2.25 gig, for this configuration. So, and it does require 2 XPIC channels in order to get the total 2.25 gig capacity. So, so that's one thing you have to keep in mind. Here's a graphic, kind of shows you how it looks like. So you'll see on the right-hand side, where we've got our channels. So we've got those 2 XPIC channels. They'll come into the antenna, and then you can see on the DT radio as far as the 2 diplexers we're going through. So more or less, again, we're sticking with the 2 diplexers, and all we're doing is we're just multiplying the support that we can do over those 2 diplexers. So each diplexer will support 1 carrier then. So in this setup here, we have 4 carriers going in there. So again, real straightforward, clean design. We don't have to have an external coupler. We don't have a second set of radios. So you can see how it's going to save you a lot of money on the installation costs. So some things to keep in mind when you do the stack carrier on the DT 4+0 configuration. It does require adjacent XPIC channels in the same subband. So that's one thing when you work with your FC coordinator. If you want to support this configuration and get 2.25 gig, you're going to have to license that combination. You will take a 3 dB hit on your transmit power when you do use the subcarrier software feature in the Navigator product. But actually, if you looked at doing it the other way, you'd have 2 radios with an external coupler. Most external couplers have a 6 dB hit. So actually you're getting 3 dB back. So you're actually ahead of the game compared to the old way you'd have to do a 4+0 setup. And again, you only have to run 1 10 gigabit fiber to utilize speeds over 1 gig. And again, we'll take care of the aggregation of all 4 channels inside the radio itself. On the ST product is limited to gigabit speed. because there's no 10 gig port on that product. So you'll see on a standard 80 megahertz product at 2048 QAM, we're at 624 meg. And then if you want to go to gigabit, you'll need to find a second 80 megahertz channel to be able to make that happen then. So again, we're going to drop down to 1024 QAM as far as to set that up. And again, we're going to use the stack 80 megahertz dual carriers in the single Navigator ST radio to provide gigabit capacity then. So here's a graphic that kind of shows you what we're doing. You'll see the two channels coming in. Since we don't have multiple diplexers, there's no OMT here. So we're going right in the diplexer, and that diplexer will support those two channels using that one transmitter then. So things to keep in mind with this when you use the subcarriers on the ST product, the ST does not support XPIC. So to be able to do gigabit with two channels, they have to be adjacent channels and they have to be in the same polarization. So we recommend you go with a rectangular antenna, a rectangular interface in the radio to be able to do that. If you only can get XPIC, then you have to look at using the DT radio itself, so that's one of the things as you go through comparing, should I use the Navigator ST with subcarriers or the DT 2+0 with XPIC? Some of these questions, you'll have to answer yourself. Again, you're going to take a 3 dB hit on transmit power, so just make sure when you do your link budget, you can afford that 3 dB. And again, no 10 gig SFP option is on the ST radio. So it limits the radio at gigabit speed. If you need to have more than gigabit speed, then I obviously look at the DT radio either in the 2+0 or the 4+0 setup. Okay, so that's just a general overview as far as the features of it and some of the rules, we'll call it, as far as be able to use it, in the setup. So let's look at a couple bombs. So I put together some bombs here to go over. So you can see this one here is a single ST radio, and I just put list pricing down that we have for our radios. So this is a 1 gig capacity. So you can see that we have a single, in this example, a single low band, high band radio. And then we also have the subcarrier licensing. We need one per transmitter, and then we have enough as far as capacity licenses to make it happen. So on the capacity licenses, the base ST radio comes with 100 meg, and what we're doing is we're adding 900 meg here. We sell it in 100 meg increments, so that's where you get the 18 keys to cover both radios then. So the base radio includes a pre-populated gigabit port to support both PoE and the data connections. Make sure you're going to add in the antennas and the power supplies, which BridgeWave can help you with. And again, we require 2 consecutive channels in the same polarization and same subband to make this happen then. So this is a bomb that kind of shows you the 4+0 setup. So you'll see, again, a low band and high band radio. I put enough capacity keys in there to get us to 2.25 gig. The base radio comes with 200 meg, so that's where we got to add the extra capacity keys to get to 2.25 gig. The subcarrier license have to be added, again, 1 per transmitter. Each radio has 1 transmitter, so that's where we get 4. And this one here, we're using XPIC. And then we also have the RLA feature to be able to combine everything together in that one single 10 gig SFP. And then I added a couple 10 gig SFPs in there. I put single mode, but we also have an option for multi-mode if you want to go that way. So again, add the antennas and power supplies. Again, it's going to require 2 consecutive XPIC channels to make this happen. So, and again, when I looked at total capacity at 2.25 gig, I'm assuming getting 80 megahertz channels at 11 or 18. But say you're at 23 or 6 where they don't have that. 23 is at 50 megahertz channels max, and 6 is at 60. Same scenario, you're going to get 2 consecutive one. The only difference is your capacity is going to be a little less. So. Okay, so that's just a real quick overview on the product and the features and stuff like that. Again, top speeds we're looking at is going to be 2.25 gig on the DT and gigabit on the ST radios. Again, no need for external couplers on the 4+0 setup. So this is going to save you additional money. It's going to save you, like I said, 6 dB for an external coupler versus 3 dB for the use of the subcarriers. So you're going to be ahead on your transmit budget. Single cable runs for speeds over gigabit, which most of our other competitors can't do that. The other thing is going to be able to use a smaller antenna on the 4+0 setups. Since you're getting 3 dB back, because you don't have to use that external coupler, that might allow you to use a smaller antenna, which is going to save you antenna costs and also maybe the tower leasing space for that. And then also saving money on hardware and installations, because you don't have to buy all this extra hardware and installation costs. So, okay, so that's pretty much it for our webinar today. So I guess we'll kind of look at questions then.
Yes, thanks, Jim. So let's see here. We have questions here. You probably have already asked these during the presentation, but we'll go ahead and ask them. Do you need to license adjacent channels when you go with the subcarrier feature?
Yeah, so either with the ST or the DT products. So the ST, you're going to be licensing 2 channels in the same subband, and they have to be adjacent. And then for the DT product, they have to be XPIC channels, and again, they have to be adjacent. So.
Okay. Is XPIC supported on the ST radio?
The ST radio does not support XPIC. So if you or your customer requires XPIC, then you'll have to look at using the DT radio then.
Awesome, thank you. Do you need a special antenna to support subcarriers on Navigator, or can you use the standard single polarized antenna that is used in another Navigator configuration?
No, you can use the same antennas that you use for Navigator, which would be the single polarization antennas. There's no special antenna options that are required to use the subcarrier feature.
Got it. Here's another question. Can you explain RLA upgrade?
So RLA upgrade, so the RLA's feature is a software feature we include as an option for Navigator. And what that does, it allows you to easily configure, taking these multiple channels together and then bonding those together within a single radio. So it's a feature we added, so allows us, using the RLA feature, we can, then have a single cable drop down, so you don't have to do all those aggregations inside your switch. We're doing everything in our switch in the radio then.
Okay. And then, are you able to explain the Nav MIMO upgrade?
We don't have an option right now for the MIMO yet. It's something that's on the roadmap, and we haven't introduced it yet, so I can't really talk about the details on that. So.
Okay, fair enough. Are there any disadvantages of using the subcarrier feature on the ST radio to get gig capacity versus buying a DT radio with subcarriers?
Sure. So if you look at the ST radio with subcarriers, your max capacity is gigabit. If you look at the DT radio, without subcarriers, your max capacity is 1.25 gig. So by using the ST, even though it's going to be cheaper than buying the DT, you're giving up 250 meg. So that would be, obviously one disadvantage. But comparison, the price difference is going to be less expensive to buy the ST with subcarrier versus the DT without subcarrier and getting similar type of speeds. Another disadvantage with the ST, it doesn't support XPIC. So that means you have to license the consecutive channels, and especially a gigabit, you'll need the 280 megahertz channels. So if for some reason in your area it's congested, I can't get 2 consecutive 80 megahertz channels, but I can get the one XPIC 80 megahertz channel and I want gig, then I have to go to the DT product then. The other disadvantage on the ST would be I'm taking a 3 dB hit. So I'm saving some money on the hardware, but I'm going to take a 3 dB hit on my transmit power. So again, I have to make sure I can support that. Versus the DT radio, I'm going to get full transmit power, without using subcarriers at the same speed. So I'm going to get an advantage on that side. So again, when you look at the presentation and stuff, and you consider, using ST gigabit, with subcarriers versus DT without subcarriers at gig, again, look at all these advantages and disadvantages and see what works best for you then.
Awesome, thank you. I don't see any more questions flowing through, so we can wrap up the presentation. And were there any closing remarks that you wanted to address, Jim, before we let go?
No, I think just on the Navigator side, we've been shipping it from January this year. We've had really great demand on it, especially for a new product. A lot of customers have enjoyed the replaceable diplexers. I know ordering through StreakWave, a lot of people have complimented that, since StreakWave carries a variety of different inventory on the Navigator product, where you can kind of more or less pick and choose, it makes configuring and putting stuff on the shelf and ordering a lot easier. So that's some of the feedbacks I've got on that, so.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Jim, for handling the presentation. So if there's any questions, please go ahead and reach out to StreakWave or BridgeWave, and we'll get those questions answered. Again, this webinar was recorded, so we will get that sent out to everybody as soon as possible. Thank you again. Have a great day.